I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. As you know, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we're conducting this meeting electronically. I know that the staff has done their best to ensure that audio and video of the proceedings are captured and made available to other commissioners and interested parties. I'm calling from my home office, just to make that clear. And let me see, we don't have a place for call and roll here, but Patrick, have you, for the record, gotten their locations they're calling in from?
No, sir. I'll do that real quickly if you don't mind.
Sure.
Just do a roll call. So what I'm asking for executive committee members is just letting me know what town you're calling in from, and if you're calling in from your home or your office. Just for the record, that's a requirement under the state code for electronic meetings. So, Mr. Hobbs?
The County Administration Building in Madison.
Okay. Mr. McCullough?
My office in Warrenton.
Ms. Taylor?
I'm calling from my home in downtown Culpeper.
And Mr. Wood?
Calling from my home office in my home.
All right. And I'm here at the Regional Commission in my office as well, just for the record, not that I'm a voting member. So.
Okay. Thank you, guys. First thing we need to do is, of course, the draft agenda was distributed prior to the meeting. Changes or additions from the members of the executive committee? If not, may I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Okay, we have an agenda. Okay, the next item on the adopted agenda is public comment. While we're not able to accept public comments in today's meeting directly, the meeting notice included an opportunity to submit comments ahead of the meeting via email. Patrick, were any public comments received prior to the meeting?
No, sir, there were not.
Okay, then we'll move on to new business. We're meeting today because there are 4 grant applications for consideration under new business. Patrick, would you review each grant proposal?
Yes, sir. And what I'm going to do now is just share my screen. This is for the benefit of the live stream. So you all see the agenda and we'll just go through those items. Okay. So the first item under new business is item 4A, which is an application from the Commission to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation Small Watershed Grant Program. This results from a lot of the work that staff, especially Michelle Edwards and Joe Costello, when he was here, completed over the last year and a half to 2 years with the phase 3 of the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Implementation Plan. In follow-up to that, one of the tasks that DEQ and the state have asked PDCs to coordinate with is grant applications, which is a long-time function of PDCs. And in this case, what we're proposing and what we've got in front of you today for consideration is a project that would enable Fauquier County and the town of Warrenton to access some funding for demonstration projects for stormwater BMPs. This would also include funding for Friends of the Rappahannock and John Marshall Soil and Water Conservation District to do some education and outreach related to the stormwater BMPs that would be implemented. And then there would also be funding for the commission just to do a grant administration and coordination with our ongoing Upper Rappahannock Watershed Plan efforts. And then finally, there's some contractual funding written into the proposal for the Chesapeake Conservancy to do some custom GIS-based prioritization. And this really would tie in with a lot of the other data that has been collected over the past few years, would enable them to work with our staff and also with our partners at some of those other organizations to identify and where the BMPs throughout the region, both ag and urban BMPs, where they should be prioritized. It's not down to the parcel level. We're certainly not talking about, individual landowners and saying this is where you should put them. This is more for the sub-watershed level to allow us to figure out where we get the best bang for our buck with some of those BMPs that have been identified. Total proposed budget for the grant is about $333,000 in grant funding. Primarily the majority of that going towards the BMP implementation projects in Fauquier and Warrenton. and then 378,000 in proposed matching funds. Again, the majority coming from either existing grant applications that the county or the town have put in, or future proposed grant applications to the stormwater local assistance. So I'm happy to answer any questions. There's additional detail further on in your agenda about the development of it, but would be happy to answer any questions.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's, if someone will make a motion to approve the grant application to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation Small Watershed Grant Program, we can further discuss it if we need to.
Mr. Mayor, I so move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Now, further discussion or questions for Patrick?
Is this a
Patrick, I'm sure
2-year?
you-
I'm sorry,
ahead.
Jerry Wood talking. Is this a 2-year program, a term for this grant?
Yes, sir. It is a 2-year grant, which is one of the nice things about it. A lot of times you get the 1-year grant, but this one would allow us to spend the funds over 2 years. And I think in terms of construction projects, like we're talking about with the demonstration project, we do need that 2 years. So that would be the 2 years from grant execution or contract.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, Patrick,
who?
there's some match effort here from the PDC's side. How will that work? Are you just covering costs, or are we coming out better than whole on this?
That's a good question. And so the grant program as a whole is a 2/3 grant funded, 1/3 match funding required. The 11,700 that you referenced there would be in-kind staff time, which is funds that we have in the past utilized local per capita dues to staff our environmental program. At this current time, we also have the ability to utilize the Chesapeake Bay funding that we've received from DEQ for the last year and a half or so to offset those costs. So it's not new funding that would be required it's coming from existing sources that we already have.
Great.
Okay.
Anyone else?
No.
Then I think a voice vote is enough for this one. So all in favor of this approving this grant, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Okay. Patrick, the next item.
Yes, sir. Item 4B is our annual application to the Department of Transportation for the Rural Transportation Work Program, and as outlined in the memo, this is a same amount as the past 7 or 8 years, $58,000 in federal funding from the Federal Highway Administration through VDOT, and we match with a 20% match, $14,500. Really, the upshot of this, I think every jurisdiction in our region has benefited at some point from these funds, and that goes either towards our Rural Transportation Committee, towards the ability for staff to time with smart scale applications. In the case of the proposal that's in front of you here, the FY21 work program, we've included not only the smart scale applications and the technical assistance that we can do for those, but we've got a couple other kind of specific called out projects, which would be our regional long-range transportation plan update, continuing to maintain and update the active transportation plan, which was passed in December, and then general technical assistance through GIS and grant writing, and then a couple of identified projects I just want to highlight. One would be a Route 29 corridor review in Culpeper County, south from the town. And for Mr. Hobbs' benefit, it's possible that this could extend into Madison. We haven't really fleshed out the details of this, but this is one that Culpeper County staff requested some assistance with initially. And then also through conversations with our partners in Fauquier County and the town of Warrenton, as well as Culpeper County, beginning again that look at the Route 211 corridor as a result of some of the potential impacts of Clevenger's Corner in Culpeper County and the issues associated primarily for Fauquier and the town of Warrenton. And then the last one I'll mention is just a sidewalks report for town of Washington and Rappahannock County, which was actually on this year's work program, but is going to be carried over to next year. And we're going to just really collect some GIS data and do some initial mapping for Rappahannock County and town of Washington, sort of similar to what we did for Madison County a year and a half ago.
Same as the other. If we can go ahead and get a motion to adopt the resolution approving the application for the State Research and Planning SPR funds from VDOT for the fiscal year 21 Rural Transportation Work Program. If we can get that for discussion, then we can ask further questions.
I move approval as proposed.
Thanks. Second, thank you. Okay, now any further questions for Patrick? Okay, hearing none. This is a resolution, so I will ask for a roll call vote. Patrick?
Okay. Mr. Hobbs,
Aye.
Mr. McCullough,
Aye.
Ms. Taylor,
Aye.
Mr. Wood, Mayor Coiner.
Aye. Okay. Patrick, next item.
Okay. Item 4C are applications that the commission would be submitting to the Commonwealth Transportation Board Smart Scale program. If you recall from past years, some of the changes that have been in place with the Smart Scale program limit the amount of applications that an applicant can have. And so an applicant can be a county or a town that maintains its own roads, as well as a regional organization such as a regional commission. So in this case, as in past years, staff has reached out to and worked through our Rural Transportation Committee and with VDOT Culpeper District staff to review the applications that would be going in from the region, and where applicable, offer our services or frankly our standing applications slots to localities that might need them. So through that process this year, we've identified 3 projects that all come from Fauquier County, where the county staff has requested that the commission serve as applicant for those projects. And so what's in your packet here is just a listing of those 3 projects, a quick map of each of those, and then a request for support to submit those projects. The 3 projects are, 2 of them are at Interstate 66 at exit 28 near Marshall. One is as I scroll down here, one is the south side of the exit ramp there. So there's Interstate 66 running east-west. And so they've got proposal for an R-cut intersection down here off Carter's Run Road. The second is on the north side of Interstate 66 here. So you see the Interstate 66 kind of running this direction. And on the north side, a proposed roundabout that would go in at the bottom of the exit ramp to facilitate safety and better traffic flow there. And then the final project is at Lee's Mill Road and Route 151729, just north of Opal. So if you're looking at the map on the screen, you've got Opal to the south here. You've got a gas station right here, and this would be installing a R-cut here where you wouldn't allow left turns coming out from Lee's Mill Road, but would instead make them go to the right and then do a U-turn further down on 29. So really, the commission's role here is to serve as the applicant. The county staff is inputting most of the information. We're participating in some meetings with county staff and VDOT as necessary, and we'll continue to work with them to get the full applications in on that.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I so move.
Thank you for the motion requested. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, this is just the approval of this. So all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. None. Okay, thank you. Patrick, financial reports.
I've got, sorry, sir, I have one more under new business.
Oh, you do have 4. Okay, 4D. Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So the fourth one, item 4D, is an application to the Community Care Corps program. And as the memo outlines, this is in response to some of the items we've discussed previously in October 2019. I presented to the commission regarding some of the funding changes related to our Foothills Area Mobility System program, which operates the FAMS call center under contract with the Community Services Board. It also has a half-time position here at the commission for the mobility management program. And this kind of program, the Community Care Corps grant program, is one that is funded through the U.S. Administration for Community Living and Administration on Aging, and they've given some funding to an organization called the Oasis Institute, which is also partnering with several other organizations outlined there in the memo, to distribute this funding for innovative local models to provide volunteer non-medical assistance to older Americans, persons with disabilities, and family caregivers. And frankly, that's the audience and the population that the FAMS program serves predominantly. And so we felt like there was a good match here between this program and the existing program that we have, and the opportunity to sort of expand some of the work that FAMS has done. So what we're proposing is a request for $150,000 to this Community Care Corps grant program. And as outlined on the following pages, really would expand the FAMS call center operations, would enable RRCS as a volunteer driver program to purchase a vehicle, wheelchair accessible vehicle, to expand the volunteer driver program that they operate called Caravan. Again, would expand some of the offerings that the FAMS call center does beyond just transportation, but would also get into more information and resource referral, some of which we do already. And then the implementation of a volunteer driver mileage reimbursement incentive program, which wouldn't be so much reimbursing the drivers, but would give them the option for a donate it forward to nonprofit programs or nonprofit organizations in the region. And this is something that Path Foundation has talked about with us, and sort of looked at as an opportunity to kind of pilot that program as well. So the $150,000 would be matched. It's a 25% match program, and the match would, as proposed, would come from Path Foundation, as well as tracking in kind your driver mileage and hours from both RRCS and Voltran. I will note we've seen both of those volunteer driver programs basically come to a standstill as a result of the pandemic. So that part is a little bit up in the air, but we expect as this comes back into play, as we're able to achieve some greater sense of normalcy here, that we would see those begin to come back into play as part of the in-kind match as well.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the grant application to Community Care Corps grant program to support the FAMS program?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay. Motion and a second made to approve the grant application. Is there any further discussion or questions for Patrick?
Yeah, I have one question for Patrick. So the 25% works out to $37,500. If I'm calculating 150 and 37.5, the question I ask is, if the volunteer driving hours don't come in, have you calculated what you thought of that 37.5 was going to be actual path money and the other part was going to be in-kind service?
So Path has generally, in this case, and as with past grant applications, they've sort of given us a $30,000 number that would be they'd be comfortable with. So in this case, I think we've looked at Path as either a 25 or 30,000, which you're correct on the 37.5. So we've looked at 7,500 as the minimum required from the volunteer driver programs.
So
what I would say is that if those don't come through, then we would begin to look at either other foundations, Pop Up or Wellness Foundation, who's been a good partner. We'd also look at the possibility of matching some of our existing funding that comes through DRPT for this. But I think with Path, we've felt comfortable in that 25 to 30,000 range, and then coming up with the other, what that would be, 12,500 or 7,500, depending.
Yeah, so that was my question is, you feel comfortable that if this driver program doesn't reestablish because of COVID during that period of time, that we would be able to find that elsewhere?
I do think so, yes. And I think that's something that if we got to the point where the Community Care Corps grant overseers of this grant program came back to us and said, here's how much we're willing, and, make the match firm. Before I would sign any sort of contract with them, I would be more, I guess the term I would use is I'd be more concrete in terms of here's exactly where the match is going to come from. And I think that would buy us additional time to see how those driver programs respond here in the next several months.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Then all in favor of approving the grant application, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Thank you. Now, financial reports, Patrick.
Thank you. So what the two financial reports that I submitted, the first one will be the, I guess, simpler one, or the more easy to understand at this point, and that's the current FY 2020 year-to-date revenues and expenditures through March 31st. What I would say is that everything remains on track as through the end of March, and even now as we're approaching the end of April. Through March, we were at 77% on revenues, and expenditures were at 66%. So we're well ahead on those, and that's pretty typical, at least for my 3 or 4 years here as director. Our revenues are usually ahead of expenditures, and we will see the expenditures catch up in the last quarter here. But I think in terms of where we are with both of them, I'm very comfortable that FY 2020 will be net neutral, if not net positive for the commission in terms of reserve funds, things of that nature. A couple of expenditure notes just to tell you that we will probably go over on. One is health insurance costs. The amount that's budgeted in the budget for FY 2020 was $41,300. We will exceed that, and that's because we had a mid-year employment change where we had a new employee that took on health and dental insurance options or coverage through the commission. We also had a mid-year change for another employee, and so we've got those expenses which will go up. I will say that those will be covered by lower than expected payroll expense costs, again, just because of employee turnover during the year, and frankly, with one position, just the time it took to be able to fill that position. So I don't see it exceeding the overall budget in any way. It's just on that specific line item, health and dental will be higher than expected. Had a couple of notes, and I'll get into this a little bit later as well, but we've got a couple of grants where they have asked us as of the current timing here at the end of April to kind of pause spending we're able to in terms of non-essential spending. So our staff time, working on grants and things remains in place, but specifically for the DRPT rideshare program money, they've asked us to sort of pause on some of the advertising and marketing, and that makes sense in terms of there are fewer people commuting, and the audience that you're looking for is in some ways looking at other options now in terms of telework and other opportunities as well. So it's been a pause. I will say the positive note there is that unlike in previous years, the rideshare program has indicated that we will be able to carry over unspent funds into the next fiscal year. So we will be working with the DRPT staff over the next weeks and months to figure out what that carryover number looks like as part of that. So I don't think there's any other notes that I really wanted to highlight. Everything, as I said, for FY20. I think we remain in good position and don't see anything that would cause us to lose revenues as currently listed.
Thank you, Patrick.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
For Patrick, do you think on the per capita dues that we're looking at for 2021, and I know we approved back in a year ago, a 0.83 cents per cap, but do you think we can leave it and have it at what it was in the previous year rather than raise it? I know all of them are raised except maybe Rappahannock County. I think Culpeper is almost $1,000. Fauquier are almost $1,000. So do you think that we could keep that per capita at the same thing that was in 2020 budget?
You're referring to the FY 2021 dues.
Yes.
Ultimately, that would be the commission's prerogative. I've paid attention to the kind of the discussions locally. I know with revenue concerns and lost revenues, both for the current fiscal year and for FY 2021. If that was something the commission wanted to look at, then I certainly think that would be the commission's prerogative to say we can leave the population rates as the FY. It would be the 2016 population rather than 2018, which is what accounts for those changes. I know most local budgets are set at this point, but I again would kind of defer to you all if that's the discussion you wanted to take up. We could make that change if it was the commission's decision.
It was only a suggestion, and with the times being like they are and budgets being like they are right now, any help that you can give local government would certainly, I know, be appreciated. One other thing I'd have to ask, do you think that the health and dental insurance will be as high as it was in the 2020 budget, which was about $70,000. Do you think it would be that high?
So in the FY 2021 budget that you quote, that $70,000 number, that is sort of at this point is based on bringing on a new employee for the regional planner position, and that employee taking on individual coverage, as well as another employee that we had talked about back in February with the farm to school liaison position. I will say that the FY 2021 budget that has that 70,000 number does include insurance for that position, but at this point we have not made a decision to interview or to even advertise for that position. So it's included there, but my sense is that it's likely that number would be somewhat lower. That's more of a highest level of what we would anticipate seeing in terms of the health and dental for FY 2021.
One other question, and I'll stop. The website update, you've got it $7,000 in the budget 2021. Have you looked more closely at that and really come up with a realistic figure?
So, and when you're looking at the FY 2021, so the $7,000 for the website update was actually this current fiscal year, so FY 2020. In the proposed FY 2021 budget, I've removed that one. So yeah, that project, and I'll get into that in just a little bit too, but the project is nearing completion, but it won't be, we won't even have a line item for that in FY 2021.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Patrick, I agree with Jerry. I think on principle, if nothing else, because maybe the amounts are large, maybe they're not, but we're going to take such a hit this year. I think just on principle, we should work to remain the same or lower. We're going to probably have to do some payroll things and move some things around and hopefully not take any drastic actions. That remains to be seen, but certainly we're going to have to take actions. And so I think either for real help or for just on principle, we should look to do the best we can on that per capita.
Well, are you talking about per capita, or is this raising the population rate to 20?
Well, whether we use if we're doing a tax rate, we're talking about a base versus the rate, or whether we equalize the rate and use the current population. I mean, it seems to me that you would use the current population, and then if that affects us negatively, then I'd be talking about using sort of an equalization rate or a slightly lower rate so that folks wouldn't be hit by it. It might take a little more look-see than just off the top of our head talking about it here. But anyway, make some attempt to affect that a little bit. I'm ready to make a motion off the top of my head. Yeah.
I guess I could see a couple different options. I mean, I think all of those requests in terms of the budget lines have gone in. And again, I think some of the jurisdictions, some of the counties are, well into that. But I would be hesitant on looking at the, and let me scroll down to that line item here on the proposed budget. I guess my one hesitation would be for the jurisdictions such as Rappahannock County and Town of Washington to actually benefit from the lowered population from 2016 to 2018. I'd be hesitant to go back to them and say, well, actually, we're going to go back to our previous amount, and so you're going to owe more. So I don't know if it would be preferable to do some sort of a hybrid between whatever the lowest is, or if it would be better to submit maybe, look at the way of submitting the invoice or the dues rate at the beginning of the year, if we split it by quarter and see how people do that way. I'm not sure how to efficiently do that so it doesn't penalize, whether it's penalizing 11 jurisdictions or 2 of them in the case of the 2 that have a lower rate here. But
Mayor Corner, in that vein, would it be your idea be just to freeze the dues, whatever they may be, for this coming year?
Would that be Mayor Coyner or Mr. Wood? I guess I would look at you. Or are you looking to freeze them at the FY20 amount here, or would you be looking to freeze the FY21 amount going forward? What would be your suggestion there?
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
yeah, I certainly wouldn't want to cause Rappahannock County to have to come back and pay what they paid in 2020, because that would certainly be higher than what they would be paying in 2021. I certainly wouldn't want that to happen. And so I think my thing is suggestion to try to work something out on this and how you would work it out. I have no idea at this stage whether I'd want to freeze it or whether I would not.
Well, how about, it seems to me totally fair to use the most current population that we have. And then if that helps people or hurts people, I think that is the population that should be used. Now, to then make an amount that works for people, I adjust the rate a little bit. I can't do those calculations off the top of my head, but it does seem like you'd use the current population. If somebody's gone way up in population or way down, it doesn't seem fair to act like that hasn't taken place. But I am trying to help people from a financial concern. So that would, I guess, have to come into a rate standpoint, and even freezing the dues. If someone's gone way up or way down, perfectly freezing with the change in real circumstances, I'm not sure that's fair. So an equal rate to everybody is fair. Using the most current population is fair. So to me, you lower the rate a little bit and you use the most current population, and that's a fair way to lower it a little bit. But
I guess one suggestion I might have would be I could convene the county administrators and town managers to get their feedback. And obviously we have 2 county administrators on the call today, but I guess one thing I'm looking at is, given that the timing of setting the dues rate is usually at the August meeting. And again, given that at least for the majority of the jurisdictions, all of the requests for FY21 have gone in, would this be something that we could leave the FY21 proposed as it's there now and kind of revisit for the next fiscal year? Or is this, I mean, I understand the revenue hit is coming sooner rather than later. I'm just trying to figure out the easiest way to do it. And also recognizing that the dues structure is kind of laid out in the bylaws of the commission. So trying to figure out how to best, address that. Obviously take action, supplement to that, but just want to, come up with the best way to address this without,
I understand, Patrick, and going through about 16 of these at the commission, it's certainly not something that I would bring up at the last minute normally, and I never have. But I think we do have to look at this year as the unusual year that it is. Mm-hmm. I think we have to look at the issue as an emergency. If not emergency, in fact, because somebody's dues go up $400 or $100, it's hard to call that an emergency. So maybe it just gets into, again, the principle of the matter, going up in a year where people are potentially going to get hit horrendously. I think the commission needs to maybe not be equally stressed, but recognize their stress. I'll put it that way. So we recognize that our timing, our season, everything is off on this. But,
Patrick, could you tell us the difference in revenue income between, based upon just the dues between the 2020 amended and the 2021 proposed?
Yeah, Ken, give me 1 minute here. I want to say the population, and this is going to be an estimate because I don't have the number directly in front of me. The population went up from about 175,500 to about 179. And so that, with 83 cents and a 4,000 population, the difference is about $3,200, I think.
Okay, and then it looks to me that the differential between the amount of negative change between the town of Washington and the county of Rappahannock is somewhere, if you added those two together, you essentially have dropped it somewhere about $90 or so.
Yeah, it's about, I think about 113. No, you're right. Yeah, about 113.
So if you took the 113 and you held them harmless for their drop and you just froze the amount, then you're really talking about somewhere about $3,300, $3,400 of loss to the commission. So the question that I would posit, and I'm not sure that we have to make this decision today, but what I would say is if we froze the rates at the 2020 amended, but made Rappahannock and the town of Washington whole for what they would have had dropped, then we're talking somewhere about $3,400. And my question to you would be, if you had to take that $3,400 hit, how would you take that?
Sure. Offhand, where I would say it would probably come from would be some of the basic office operating expenses. It would be postponing either some office maintenance costs, or it would be reducing some of the equipment or software expenditures. Certainly, if that was the request, I could get a detailed list of what that would change.
I mean, I don't have a problem with what's being requested, with the exception, with the concept of I would not want to see it affecting the employees' salaries in any way, shape, or form, or their benefits in any way, shape, or form. But what you've described to me, would be a measured reduction of some of the operating expenses. If that's the way to do it, that I think would accomplish what I think I hear Mayor Coroner requesting and Jerry Wood requesting, and would then be able for the commission to say, recognizing the COVID thing, we've held everybody harmless, while recognizing the positive change that Rappahannock and Washington would have done. So I would suggest that as a possible way of going forward in that, if that's what the commission wants to do.
Yeah, that'd be fine with me, Paul. That suggestion would be fine with me.
Okay. Yeah, and I think, I think with commission action, hopefully at the June meeting, I would hope that we're able to get together. But even if we're not, if we have to hold a Zoom meeting, as much as I dislike the idea of holding a 20-person Zoom meeting for the commission, if we have to do that, I think that's something where if it was a one-time thing and then we revisit in August to figure out for next beyond that what the dues would look like, I think that would be certainly a suitable solution.
So I would move that we instruct Patrick to come back to us in the to set on the agenda for the next commission meeting, a reduction in the amount equivalent to the revenue to allow us to freeze the budget rates at 2020 without while recognizing the negative change for both Rappahannock and Washington. And then the whole commission could vote on it at its 2020 meeting.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Second.
Okay. Thank you, Jerry. Okay. Any other comments on that?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I certainly don't want to take anything away from salaries and benefits at all by proposing this. And actually, what I was saying, I was just asking Patrick to look into this and come back to us. It's fine if you want to do it with me. It's not. I'd much rather see us try to do something for the localities that will be taking big hits. And of course, I'm not sure that the PD9 isn't going to be taking some big hits, but also, like I said, I certainly would not want to take it away from salaries or benefits of employees.
Yeah, Jerry, I agree. I was hoping that some of those items like the health insurance that was mentioned and some of the positions that hadn't been filled, I was hoping that maybe we could steal a couple thousand out of some of those. I didn't know. And Patrick will know best where it would come from. But I was hoping it would be a little more invisible than anything that would take a bite. If it would take a bite, for example, I think Gordonsville's increase was $20 or $30, $80, I don't know, some small amount. So to me, it was more of a principle thing
Right.
than it was a real help. Because obviously, if we go ahead with the 21 budget or do this, it's all the same to Gordonsville. So I'm certainly not speaking about my locality. But yeah, I like Paul's proposal. So anyway, any other comments before we take a vote? Okay, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Okay, we've got something to move forward on a little bit. Thank you all. Patrick, did we kind of cut that in the middle of the budget discussion finished? I forgot where we were on the budget in
I'm
general.
sorry.
No, actually, I think it was actually really a good segue from one year to the other. And honestly, the budget that was produced here and presented to you all and to anyone else that would look at the agenda packet here really is to meet the requirement of that June 1st deadline. A budget per the bylaws, a budget needs to be presented. And so I would note that on the budgeted items, it is a reduction from the current FY 2020 by almost $100,000, and the majority of that is coming from two pass-through grants. One of which is the DRPT Section 5310 operating grant, which has funded the Foothills Express through the commission, and as discussed back in October, DRPT has said that funding stream is they're going to end funding for that because there's another funding stream they'd prefer to use, and so that's money that we frankly didn't receive anything from other than a revenue bump. And we also had the USDA Farmers Market Grant, which was a 3-year grant that ended this past September 30th. So those two are the main drops in the revenue. And so ultimately, it's not so much that we're facing any sort of an issue with staffing costs or anything like that. It's pass through money that just reduces the total revenue. And that's what I'm wanted to make clear. It's not that I'm facing a choice at this point of any sort of staffing changes or anything like that. We're still good in terms of our current staff and frankly the position that is included for the farm to school liaison that is included in the budget because we've been told by PATH and No Kid Hungry that the funding is still there, but that they've shifted their kind of focus in terms of what their staff is working on to kind of response efforts here, but that they are still wanting to move forward. So it's included in the budget, but it's possible that those could both be removed as well, and the corresponding changes on the expenditures would also be completed as well. So at this point, this is a very preliminary budget, and as I outlined in the memo, I expect a lot of things to change between now and July 1, but we'll continue to communicate with you all. The last thing I would say, just in terms of revenues, is that you can see there are about 1, 2, 3, 4. There's about 8 grants out there that we have pending, and some of those are grants that we've submitted. Some of those are the funding that the PDCs worked to get included in the FY 2021 budget through the General Assembly and through the governor, which would have provided a bump of $14,000 in the state regional planning grant, which obviously with the unallotment that the General Assembly did last Wednesday with the budget for next fiscal year will not be coming. But so we have a lot of opportunities out there and pending right now. So I feel pretty good about where we are in terms of restoring some of the that are not shown this year. So more information on this as it goes forward. I guess the one thing I would ask in terms of the budget for next year is, if it's possible, it may be beneficial to have, rather than wait until June 24th, which I think is the next slated commission meeting, it might be useful to have this group as the executive committee to schedule another meeting at some point in May, just to kind of do a quick update on the budget as well, just as more information comes in, but I'll leave that to potentially after the meeting.
Okay, that'd be fine. Okay, Patrick. Okay, then, thanks. The last business we'll have is Executive Director's Report.
All right.
And personnel update, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just mix these two together. The director's report, I didn't submit a formal report in the packet, but I do have notes. And really, I just wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about some of the work that the commission staff has done as over the past month or so in response to the pandemic and working locally with you all and your staffs. Majority of our staff, as I've shared by email, is teleworking at this point. Myself and one other employee are in the office most days, just to keep someone here. And also as the boardroom remodel project, which was beginning just as the pandemic sort of, broke here, continues to be ongoing. So I'm here to kind of interact with the workers there that are taking care of that. But I would say we've adjusted pretty well for an organization that didn't really have a telework policy prior to this. I think it's gone pretty well. We have twice weekly all staff Zoom calls such as this, and then multiple phone calls between staff during the week. And the building does remain open to staff, so I know some of them are in once a week or so just to pick up files or to get something that they may have left behind. And I think, frankly, just because some people, it's been a fairly difficult adjustment in terms of not having that socialization and being in the office. So I think we're, as a director here, I'm trying to figure out, okay, not just what have we done here to address the immediate need of social distancing and trying to keep people from coming into the office, but when we get to the end of this, how are we going to integrate people back into the office? How is it impacting them not being able to come into the office as well? So we spent some time talking about that. Again, like we just talked about, continuing to track budget impacts, and not just at the local level, but obviously state and federal level, and trying to not duplicate emails to the chief administrative officers too much, but have been contacting Mr. Hobbs and Mr. McCullough and their counterparts quite a bit, just with information as it comes to us. And again, not trying to overwhelm their already overwhelmed inboxes as we get new information that comes in. One thing I would note is that staff and primarily Kristen Lamperazza and Hunter Berry have put together a couple of just kind of very general survey mechanisms that they've advertised through Facebook and then through our partner organizations in the region. And these are not, surveys that are designed to collect the same information that like Department of Health or that some of the federal agencies are collecting, but it's really collecting, general information about has your housing situation been impacted? Has your, job situation been impacted in terms of reduced hours? And where we see that being beneficial is down the road in terms of making the case for some of the non-tracked impacts, such as that's coming through Virginia Employment Commission and some other places. It's the ability to kind of have anecdotal data from our region and not just take the data that comes from state or federal level sources, but we'll be tying into future grant applications and others as well. So that is a couple of things we've done there. Funding wise, the one program that we've been most involved with in actually bringing some funds to the region is the homelessness response work of the Foothills Housing Network. And so as FHN lead agency, commission staff have been in fairly regular contact multiple times weekly, if not every day, with Department of Housing Community Development in terms of making sure that emergency funding that is flowing from both federal and state levels to work with and frankly put unsheltered individuals into hotels and motels to allow them the opportunity to have some social distancing and remove them from their vulnerable situations, at least temporarily. Money has started to flow through for that. The commission, our staff is, again, the agency is tasked with communicating with our partners at Culpeper Housing and Shelter Services, People Incorporated, and the Departments of Social Services, as well as our other housing partners, to figure out the best way to do that. Because of our current setup, the Culpeper Housing and Shelter Services, the recipient of those funds to put people in hotels and motels if they are unsheltered. But we have again, working with our partners at the DSS offices in each of the 5 counties and with our other nonprofit partners in the other jurisdictions and throughout the region, have really made aware that those funds are there. I would also note that many of the foundations, Culpeper Wellness Foundation, PATH Foundation, Northern Piedmont, I think even for Orange County, the Charlottesville Community Foundation have made funds available for similar purposes to really address some of the needs of the most vulnerable housed populations that we have in the region. So that's been something that we've spent a lot of time on just in terms of trying to figure out the mechanisms for getting some of that money into the region to address those immediate situations. And then on other items, really the environmental and natural resources and the economic and tourism, our role has primarily been information sharing, and that means that can be Michelle Edwards sharing information with the farmers markets. I think in Warrenton and Madison, you've seen both farmers markets have mobile ordering and then drive-through options that have already started. And I know in the case of Warrenton have been very successful the first 2 weekends. we're going to see similar things rolled out both in Culpeper in May, as well as the Archwood Green Barns Farmers Market in the Plains in May as well. So Michelle has been in communication quite a bit. And then on the economic development and tourism side, Hunter Berry, who's a partner, primarily worked on tourism, but Hunter has done a really good job of sharing information locally and information that he's received from, the tourism directors and the economic development directors in each of the jurisdictions. So trying to share that information, make sure it gets out to our contacts with the Twin Rivers Trail and some of our other programs as well. I mentioned briefly that the DRPT with the commuter services, the rideshare program has asked us to pause spending, but they did give us the flexibility with some of our advertising that was going on for the past month or two of shifting from, and frankly, shifting from advertising carpools and van pools to advertising telework options and trying to be a resource there. So we've seen some of that change. And then the last thing I would say is just, as this continues, as we've gone through the first month here of the month and a half, I guess, of the pandemic impacts, our staff has been on a lot of, calls with federal and state and obviously local staff. But as grant opportunities arise, we're here to be able to assist you locally in your towns and counties as well. I know that DHCD has pushed a lot of information on the CDBG funding, but I think there's a lot of other sources as well. And I'll be on a call tomorrow with the director of DHCD to talk through, potentially what role PDCs might play in terms of helping DHCD move some of the money as well, because I think they see a lot of funding coming in, and it can be a little bit daunting to have to put it out to, the 130 odd cities and counties, let alone the 196, I think, towns in Virginia. So, I think we'll have a role to play, but I want to make sure that is in keeping with the role that the localities in our region see as a best fit for us as well. So certainly reach out to myself or other members of our staff if you have questions, but we, hopefully we'll be involved as you have grant applications going in the future. And then the personnel note is just real quick to let you know that we do have a candidate for the regional position who has accepted. I'm going to be working with this candidate over the next month or so to figure out the best way to frankly onboard a new employee when some of the staff are not in the office all the time. So thankfully this person has good experience and I think will fit right in with our rural transportation and environmental planning, which is what we have tried to fit into this position since Joe left in early January. So pleased to share that and happy to be back to full staff. And then, like I said, with the farm to school liaison position, we have positive information from both PATH and No Kid Hungry, but we don't have, there's no MOAs signed or anything like that. And so we won't be advertising for that until we have approval to do so, until it's more clear from them that they're going to continue to push forward with that priority. And also, frankly, looking at the school system, since that position is one that would be working with each of the 5 county school systems in terms of nutrition services. We just have to sort of wait and see what the situation is going to be as we go forward in terms of schools reconvening and things of that nature. So,
lots of challenges.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Lots of challenges and far-reaching. And I guess this is going to play out. I mean, we'll see. I don't want to anticipate like I know. I mean, I would think we have to plan on it being this way till next year, this time and beyond.
I do say, I mean, one thing I've
not exactly the same situation we're in now, but to some extent.
Yeah, and I often say with the commission in terms of our programs and projects, because we are grant funded and because things come in throughout the year, I think sometimes we're a little bit sheltered on the front end of situations like this. I mean, I think back to the recession in 2007, 2008, and
right.
How that impacted the commission, but I think the impacts didn't really fully show until, frankly, well into the 2010s. And so I think in this case, obviously, we're gonna do our best to ensure that we've got funding in place to continue the work we're doing. But I do think sometimes we're a little bit sheltered for the first year or so, and we'll just have to pay attention to how that continues to move forward.
Okay. And again, I think it's the right thing to do to try and make a goodwill move right now. But if because of state or federal pressures on you guys and we can always take up a budget issue at any time on an emergency basis as needed. I mean, if you guys do get hit in unusual ways in the next year or two. So to be continued on that. But does anyone else have anything they'd like to say before we adjourn?
Yes, I had a question, Patrick, and I probably missed it in some of your conversation, but what's the program going forward with employees and raises and benefits? Are we going to hold firm like most of your local governments with the idea that we're not going to do any harm, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because one of the things I didn't mention for the FY 2021 budget is that we're in the very good position of having another year with no health insurance increase. I think this is the third year in a row, and also our VRS rates, we have a surplus in our VRS, so our VRS rates remain pretty low for the next 2 years. So we're in a good position with both of those. So I wouldn't anticipate at this point. I don't anticipate any need to cut costs in terms of health or dental, or to have employees pick up a higher share. I would say that I don't see, I think, just like you said, with most of our localities, everything's in terms of raises and things like that going forward. I don't see putting that in place as part of the budget. What I would say is if we are successful with grant applications, or we have some new revenues come in during the year, it may be a time to revisit the idea of, a mid-year kind of bonus type agreement, just because our funding structure is a little bit different than the local governments, but that would be something that would be down the line and would just be based on what's come in during the year and what staffing levels look like at that point.
Well, of course, everybody knows that if we don't have good people at the PDC, we don't have a PDC, and I'd look for ways to keep the folks there as happy as we can have them. So if there are any, I'm not talking about big things, if there are any little things we could do to help morale or give everybody a boost in some way, please let us know.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you, Mr. Hobbs. Anyone else? Okay, folks, thank you so much for being on this call today and this meeting. And no further ado, this meeting's adjourned. Y'all take care.